Welcome back, everybody, to Getting Past the Premium. Excited to have a repeat guest on, Kylie Hubbard with INSURICA. How are you, Kylie?
I'm doing good. I feel like we should just create a name for this series.
Yeah, I know, right? We should. Well, we
The
always have
Kylie Hubbard
things that,
series?
yeah, there's always things that we get questions about or comments on that people want to know more about. So we're like, hey, we'll have Kylie back
I
on to
love
talk
it.
about it. So yeah.
You guys know me. I can talk all day.
Perfect. Well, for everybody that might be listening for the first time, give them kind of your background, what you do, and in particular the background of the digital division at INSURICA. That'll kind of frame in some of the conversation.
Yeah. So I'm Kylie Hubbard. I am the Director of Innovation at INSURICA. INSURICA is in the top 50 large commercial brokerages in the country. Long story short, we do large commercial, PNC, tons of middle market. And then we have a digital division that does, you know, it used to be small business. We'll get into that, but that's kind of changed these days. And then we have an entire EB department, and then a small commercial EB department, personal lines, yada yada. Really excited. We're on a super good growth path, and just continuing to advance in how to be a better brokerage in this space. So my particular job is to help find solutions to either problem statements that our colleagues have, or just finding efficiencies, or recognizing ways that we can drive revenue in new and exciting ways, keeping track of what's going on in InsurTech and just the space in general, looking for opportunities / threats and how to navigate those, and then implementing technology and processes to handle all those things.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and you wanted to talk primarily about the digital division this go around, and it's an exciting place for me because that's where I always say I grew up at INSURICA
Yeah.
in the digital division. So just background on that.
Yeah, because I remember what's interesting to me in our prior conversations around what you guys are doing with the digital division is you started out as small business, but then it's more about the experience that you're giving clients and what they want versus like size in general. So
Yep.
I know that's something we wanted to dive a little bit more, is like how you figured that out and then how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah.
I think this is real quick, Kylie. I think this is a bigger, broader issue across the industry. Like in the tech world, we call it product market fit, right? And there's a bunch that goes into not only understanding that, but then the timing of, are the clients ready for that type of an experience or whatnot? So listening to how you guys went through that would be exciting.
So our digital division originally started out as INSURICA Express. INSURICA Express was a joint venture, and the original intent of it was that our leadership understood that our middle market producers were spending more time than revenue was allowing on small accounts, because the way that they service accounts and the way that things are handled in middle market generally, lots of face to face, lots of risk management type activity, although is sometimes needed, the revenue doesn't justify that kind of touch on an account. So, and I think the entire market over probably the last 10 years have, we've all gone upstream with revenue and, revenue per account and things like that, of like what our goals are for having, and just understanding ROI. And so, but our INSURICA value is community. Our INSURICA value has always been around, those community branches and the communities that our producers are in. And so it's really hard for us to have, those values or that as part of our value statement. And tell, your dentist down the street, or, a buddy of a friend, or
The guy
a
walking
buddy
in
of
to
an
get
account that you
coffee.
already have.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's like you can't, we wanted to find a way to say yes to those clients, but still create efficiency and profitability on those small accounts, smaller revenue accounts, while freeing up our middle market producers and middle market production and account management staff to then better focus on the accounts that are actually, making them money within their books. So INSURICA Express was originally set out to be a service platform specifically for our middle market producers. We would take small accounts, so like any account that, under, it just kind of depends on like the location of our branch, but like under $1,000, under $2,000 of revenue. And if the entire account was under that amount, and then, if also, like, obviously there's like a few handfuls that are connected to a bigger account that like, just need to stay there. But if there's not a true like firm connection, we took those books of business and we rolled them all into a centralized location. We had, account managers, and they handled that book of business in a much more, I'll call it transactional. I kind of hate to use that word because I think there's so much more to this than it being transactional, because this is a relationship business, and it doesn't really matter if it's, in person or digitally, you still have to build a relationship. But we have built processes primarily to, better serve those small commercial accounts, because, you had somebody that was readily available. You had really efficient ways to get certificates. You had really efficient ways. And it started out as just processes.
Yep.
We had the same tech stack that you would normally have anywhere. You have your AMS, you have your CRM, you have, your online raters. And we learned how to do that business, even wholesale ENS. We found the right partners that could help us and understood our business, where, you're turning around business a little faster than you normally would. And then, put an emphasis on what I was saying is building a relationship with those clients, but you're just doing it via not in-person method. You're talking to them on the phone, you're communicating with them through email. So that was the original intent.
Which I want to highlight something in there before you move on to where it got, because I love this, and we've had this conversation in previously, but it started with process, not technology, which I think is so important to highlight, because everybody always thinks that, in order to do small business, like you got to have some sort of a low touch technology that, automates everything or whatnot, when in reality, that's not the case. And I would argue that if you don't have the right processes already in place, implementing technology is going to make it worse.
Yeah, it's not helpful.
Yeah.
100%. You can maintain a small commercial book profitably with the right processes.
Yes.
And it's all about, and every agency, I think their process looks a little different. Streamlined is kind of the word that I would go to, and that means different things to different people. And how, you have to look at what size is your agency, how many employees do you have available. Are you in a place to where you can, like, we're so fortunate to be at a place to where we could literally build an entire branch for this process. A lot of agencies aren't in that position. And so, building kind of a process that maybe merges kind of the two, right? And it might be the same people, but you process and you handle this type of business differently than you handle this type of business. And, maybe you centralize some things, maybe you don't, but whatever means, whatever efficiency and streamlining and lower touch means to you,
Yep.
those processes are what actually get you where you want to go, from taking that business to not being profitable. Because if you're not doing anything to keep those ROIs in check, you're probably losing money on those small commercial accounts.
Oh, for sure.
Can I?
And I think tech is a way to expand, which is where I'll get in a minute, but it's not the be all end all.
Yeah, totally agree.
Can I ask a question real quick, Kylie, around
Sure.
maybe some of the just what I've found to be an integral piece in transitioning relationships and whatnot to this type of model? Like, how did you wade through the conversations with the producers around understanding that, like, not every small account is tied to a larger account and
Yeah. Well,
whatnot? Because we run into that a lot, right? Then there's like all this untapped opportunity with a smaller account, and this guy's very influential in the community, and while he might not be big, he knows this other guy that's really big, and all of a sudden, like, we get just inaction.
Joe's brothers, uncles, nephews married to Sue that, need to be thinking about.
Yeah. It took a long time to.
Like, how long?
Sometimes we're still convincing producers to, let go and let live. We have had incredible abilities to, and this all, if you've talked to me, everything goes back to data. And so our leadership kind of said, pull everybody's books and physically show them that 80% of their revenue comes from 20% of their accounts. And it is so true. And it's
amazing how it works out.
It's almost always that breakdown. I mean, it can vary, but it's almost always true. And so you kind of have to say, and I don't think you could talk to an account management team and not get the answer of, I'm drowning, right? Like, I've never met an account manager that's like, oh yeah, I don't have enough to do.
Plenty of time.
Right? Like that. Yeah. Like, that's not a thing. So it usually comes down to their team, and the production staff team that can help influence that, because we're like, hey, we're going to take like 80% of your accounts off your desk. How do you feel about that? And everybody's like, oh yeah, this is great. And then, we do some things to incentivize the producers to kind of adopt that model. So from the beginning, it's kind of like, all right, you're going to be incentivized to pass off small accounts. We're not going to tell you can't. There are things that happen if you don't. And I won't go into like commission breakdowns and things, but you get different amounts of commission depending on what size that account is. We have, minimums and things like that. Yeah. And so that usually is enough to kind of get them interested. And then it really boils down to kind of put your money where your mouth is. And we give a value proposition of saying they're going to feel just as taken care of at this digital unit as they would in your office. They're going to be good clients, and they're going to be well taken care of, and they're probably going to be serviced better than if they were in your office. And 95% of the time, that's true. There are the occasional accounts that it's just not a good fit, right? People want to go into an office sometimes. People want to do, they want a paper signature, but it's very few and far between these days. And so it's really a culture shift of getting the insured comfortable, but also, making sure that the producers and the account management team know we're going to take good care of them. And that comes down to process as well. And making sure we have good service standards, and we have, minimum, having an SLA that really is we can uphold, and really bring that overall INSURICA value to those customers, just in a little bit of a different way. A lot of times we'll have our small business unit. I mean, they service business across the country, not even a lot of places now, it's not even where our branches are, or not even associated with one of our branches, something that we maybe generated ourselves, and they don't always know that we're not like in a branch, right?
That's how they'll go, right?
Yeah, they'll go a long time before they realize they're in a completely different state than that branch. Which I think it sounds like sneaky, and it's not trying to be at all. It's just we want to represent those branches just like they were doing whenever they were physically in that branch. So it's a lot of put your money where your mouth is in terms of getting the producers on board. But I think initially it's incentivize them to want to go down this path, and show them why it's important, and support them in growing that top 20%.
Yeah. I think I'd be curious your thoughts on this. Something that we've experienced is, I feel like all of us tend to make it bigger in our mind, that like the hurdles that we feel like are going to come up, right? Like, well, this client's always brought cash in to pay their bill. Like, they're always going to want to bring cash in. And it's like, well, have we ever like talked to them that there are other options for paying their bill, and that they might want to pay it online, or they don't have to drive across town to do it? Like, what have we done to at least try to get them to work in a different way, or do a different process? And particularly producers, we get that all the time, where, well, if I've been doing it this way with this client forever, like if we do something different, how am I going to explain that to them? Why are we changing? And all of that, we create these hurdles in our mind that aren't really hurdles.
Nope, they're really not. That's kind of a funny, that's kind of a funny thing, because that's a big, worry that a lot of people have. But if you just tell them this is how it's done, most people are adaptable. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's like that 5% that, like, and if you are a local branch, right? And that's why I say every agency and how they handle this efficiency is different, because not everybody has branches in, all of the United States. It's like, it could be like y'all, to where you have, localized places. You have a handful, and they're all relatively around your insureds. And, if they still want to come bring in a check, whatever. But you could literally at renewal just say, hey, this is how you're going to make your payment. Here's a link, or whatever your payment process is. And just don't even give them.
Well, it's like
what blows my mind is all the other. I was at the doctor's office this morning, and they have all sorts of new processes and policies in place. And
do they ask you about them? Do they say, is this okay?
No, they didn't call me and ask me.
They just do it.
And I look around the room too, and demographically, I'm like, okay, so like they are all capable of changing and whatnot. Apple sends out a new iPhone update. They don't call me and ask me
exactly.
this would be great. And if I have the ability to adapt and what I think about it, and everyone just grabs it and moves on.
Yeah,
So
you just do it. It's not like, you just send them a DocuSign, like
Yeah.
you just you just go, and it's not like, and you act like that's exactly how it's supposed to go, and then
yeah.
usually, I mean,
Because it
maybe every
is.
once in a while, yeah, but I mean, maybe every once in a while people be like, what is this? And you just say, oh, this is how you're gonna sign your documents this year, and they go, oh, okay. Like,
Mhm.
there is very, very few people who resist that change to working in a more digital environment than anybody actually thinks. Like the hurdles are being created by
Us.
you and not
Yeah.
actual customers.
Mhm.
Well, and most of the time, the customer's probably asking themselves, like, why is my insurance? The only thing that I have to go take a payment in for is my insurance. Like, and they may
Mhm.
just feel like that's the way the industry is and they've written it off, but everything else we do is digital or what we've been talking about. It evolves, process changes.
Yeah.
And, for some reason, it's like we all just think like we got to do it the same way we've done it for 40 years.
Well, I think that's one of the big reasons why we are as an industry as a whole, we're steps behind the rest of, just our everyday industries of like how everybody transacts business and how everybody does, service-based businesses, because it's functioned fine
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
forever. And the resistance of change, I don't think that shift came of mentality of, we need to pivot and do things differently to, I don't think that was forced until the consumer started demanding it. Because sometimes change is hard, and that change management within, agencies and brokerages that have been doing things the same for 50 years or 40 years or however long, that change management is so difficult that it doesn't seem worth it.
Yeah.
But I think the consumer in the last 10 years has started to demand, and not necessarily, demand is maybe a hard word, but there's been a turnover of, who are the decision makers and who are the owners of these companies and
How are they used to interacting
yeah,
with things?
how are they used to interacting? This is where we go. We want to meet you where you want to be met, but
Yep.
we're also going to we're originally not going to give you options. We're just going to say this is how things are done. But generally, as we move forward, that's how people want to do business these days. People, millennials are taking over these decision making positions, or running these companies, and even older generations too, although we think about those being the ones that are like the most resistant, they're also very capable and are starting to embrace the idea that, like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah, no.
Right? Like, who has time to drive across town? Or like, why would I, if I didn't have to, why would I do?
Yeah.
And I think that it's like a varying thing, like signing documents, e-signature is just like a part of life now. E-payments, part of life. I think there's still some, there's big pushes to have, big online accessible portals like, Liberty Mutual provides or State Farm provides. And that's a little unrealistic from a cost perspective for some agencies to have those experiences for their customers, for like in a brokerage standpoint. And I still think the jury is out of whether like commercial clients really care that much about it. But there is starting to become like this just expectation that, an online portal is available and I can hop on and, get a copy of my policy or my auto ID cards as easily as I could anywhere else. And I think that kind of mentality is pushing us as an industry to just, bite the bullet and make those change management decisions. It, and that's just kind of driving the evolution of that thought process.
Well, I think that's a great segue into the tech side of what you guys are building, but I think you're spot on. Like, there's some technology that is becoming table stakes, right? You've got to have it. It's the DocuSign, e-payments, just stuff like that people are going to equate it to how they do business in other avenues of their life. And why isn't it the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a necessity to figure out how you're going to adapt to those things. But then after that, all of the other technology that you could implement that, let's say, is more client experience or even for internal use, things like that. How are you guys evaluating that tech? How do you guys make that decision? What are you doing in the in your division to think through how and what and when do we make these decisions around technology?
Yeah. Our technology journey and like our innovation journey really, sped off. We've had this value of, all right, we're going to invest in innovation. We're going to be an innovative company. We're going to put time and money into making that a reality. That really took off when we grew that digital division from just INSURICA Express to now we call it INSURICA Direct now, because it has turned into a true sales platform. It's not just a service platform anymore. We're selling tons of new business through this process. We're servicing a ton of new business from this process. We're the amount of accounts in that department is pretty incredible, and we're profitable on those. And being able to scale that division is now in sight. It started as a service, and we didn't really care how big or how profitable it was. And now it's just like we have this goal that to make this a large portion of our revenue as a whole at INSURICA. At least, it's a impactful amount of revenue that we're handling in that department. And so with that scale and with realizing that we could scale in that place, that is where our innovation practices really took off. And we really started looking at, evaluating technology on a regular basis, understanding where our problem statements are, understanding where our bottlenecks were. And in that same vein, you guys probably see this in your business side as well. It's real hard to find good insurance talent. It's real hard. And keeping up with that scale, because we were very fortunate to be able to scale fairly quickly, and we're continuing to scale really quickly. Like, it's really hard to staff at the rate that we scale.
That's a whole nother podcast in and of itself.
Yes. And so
to
combat that, like, this whole technology kind of journey started with, we're scaling at a place that we can't staff for. Our processes are only as good as how much capacity that any one person has. And so we started saying, all right, where's our bottlenecks? What do we need to do? That's where we got into data analysis. That's where we got into how do we look at our books of business to make sure that we're also as a digital unit working on profitable business. What are the avenues that we can take? So even within that section of our business, we're looking at size, and we're looking at how accounts, even within that business now, we have accounts that are serviced in a particular way. If they're super small, if there's kind of a medium size, they're serviced a particular way. If they're larger, and now at that digital unit, and why we moved away from using the word small commercial, is there's some pretty darn large accounts that we service in a digital manner, because that's how they need to be serviced. They don't need they don't need all of those touches, but that doesn't mean that they're not good size. We're not going to be servicing a hospital or running a hospital or like, a major, oil refinery or
Yeah.
something within that department. But there's plenty of businesses and industries that just don't need that really heavy touch, and they don't want that. They want that fast turnaround service. They want, but we're educated, right? We do hold a very large value of, we might not be the cheapest, but we're definitely going to still give you the expertise that you would get in a middle market section. Anyways, that really drove understanding those bottlenecks and then figuring out where can technology help us be more efficient in those areas, because we couldn't, and it's still just a struggle to get talent in this area. And we kind of dedicated, we've been pretty dedicated to, growing green people into the industry through this division too. You get a lot of at-bats. That's what we call it. Like, you get a lot of at-bats in that unit too. So you learn insurance really, really quickly. You can learn
Becomes
coverage.
A training ground. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like a huge training ground to learn insurance fast. Just because you see a lot of it.
I'll add something to that too, if you don't mind. So we've been talking about internally, which we don't have certainly the scale you guys have, but career pathing, right, is what you're kind of talking about. For a new person to our industry, I think it's becoming more and more important to try to show people that they have a career path, but it's also very difficult to do in a lot of our firms because they're relatively flat, at the end of the day. But it also, the flip side of that is, makes a ton of sense too. We're bringing somebody into large commercial where it's very complex. Every account is slightly different in what they need. You can't get that in a book. It just takes time and experience. And so I think that this is a great way to start people out in a more transactional, to use that term.
It's like,
that's not the right
I
term,
feel like
I
feel like there's a better term, but I don't know what that is.
We use the same
like
thing.
It's like, still, I want to emphasize that, like, we're still really intelligent and we're still really falling on the value of understanding coverage and understanding the risks of an industry. And we teach that, and we live that, and we want, to provide good, consultation of what something, what coverages and what types of policies somebody needs. But it is more transactional than a typical middle market. I hate calling it that, but it is what it is.
I agree. But it's also can be the experience that the client wants, right? Which is kind of when you guys call it direct, it makes a ton of sense, because even a larger client, may not want a full, consultative advisory relationship. They're like, I got a lot going on in my business. Just like, give me good insurance and, move on. Yeah. And we have to understand that, because if we're beating our heads against the wall trying to, do all this extra stuff for a client like that, when they just want a good experience and want their insurance in place and want to go, build bridges or whatever, then let them go do it, we're never going to win that battle. Right. And there's always going to be tension. And that's one of the things I've always taken away with how you've rebranded it and positioned it as direct, is it's more about the experience than it is about the size.
It is 100%. And I'm really excited to kind of get everybody else on on that page, because I think that it's, small commercial is almost like a buzzword in our world, but I just think there's so much more to it than that. But I mean, from a tech perspective, that really was the drive to, implement. Kind of started with just like DocuSign. In the digital unit, obviously DocuSign was just like kind of a duh moment. But, we kind of proved out that you can use it, and online payments and online signatures and, online renewals. and those kinds of things. And we proved it out that it works pretty well in small commercial. And those are all things like, you know, obviously this was like years ago now, but like that kind of started our journey of, and those things have now incorporated themselves into middle market.
Yeah.
And our middle market teams are using all of those things, even though the digital unit was kind of the guinea pig for the original versions of that. And that has spread into, you know, digital submissions and multi-raters and things of that nature that you really kind of only originally kind of coupled with a digital experience. And those are all getting kind of pushed up, and we're now having the middle market interested in implementing some of those things too. So it's really exciting to see that tech stack move. And you know, when I say tech stack, it's like a lot of that's not necessarily like end user tech. A lot of that is kind of behind the scenes tech of like business development, and how are we finding leads, and how are we you know, supporting producers and their teams to make good decisions. So like a lot of the tech that we've implemented is, you know, data driven. We're leaning into GPT, we're leaning into machine learning, we're leaning into some of these things to create more efficiency. And it's not necessarily like end user technology. We're obviously like implementing end user technology, and like and there are some things that are creating efficiencies, but it's really interesting from our perspective and from our department perspective. A lot of things that we're working on are kind of behind the scenes tech that is helping refine all of the processes and create efficiencies, RPA, those kinds of things to, you know, take remedial tasks off.
Robotic process automation for everybody out there.
Yes, robotic. Yes, sorry, I just assumed everybody would know that.
Oh, you never
I guess not. But you know, finding ways to just pluck off like little things creates huge efficiencies for all of our teams.
Do you guys find shiny tech tools that look great and decide to implement them, or do you find a problem first and then go solve the problem?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
A
Can't help
lot
but
of
to explore
our
the shiny stuff.
yeah, I mean, it's I would say 80% of the time there is a problem statement that somebody has brought to us that we're trying to solve. And so we go out and look for solutions for that. And like I said earlier, it's not necessarily always a tech solution. It might just be like a, you know, new process or a new position or a new team or something that can help make that process more efficient, or just fix whatever, you know, issue. You know, a lot of times we'll get people to come to us and be like, man, my job would be so much easier if this or this happened, or if I could have this more automated. Automating things is just like such a big thing that we're trying to do all the time, right? Automating loss runs, automating risk management services, automating risk assessment, automating all of these things that take a lot of time. And it's really like taking a lot of time to prep all of those things, right? A lot of the efficiency tools that we're implementing on an end user basis are taking things off of people's plates that are, I don't want to call them medial, but they're just prep for doing their actual job, right? A risk manager needs, you know, a good spreadsheet of loss run history, and that loss run history comes in all forms and shapes and sizes from all the different carriers. How do we streamline? You know, sometimes they'll spend hours like conglomerating all that information, preparing a report to go give, you know, their good risk management advice and using their expertise of what we actually pay them to do. You know, and how do we allow them to do more of that and less of this prep stuff? And so things like that, you know, OCR technologies and, you know, we're leaning into those kinds of efficiencies to help alleviate the time and let our experts do what they're experts at.
Yeah, totally
That makes
agree with that. No, that's phenomenal. I love the way that you guys have thought through a lot of this. It's been interesting to see how it's kind of evolved. So I think everybody out there listening can take away a few things that you guys are doing and apply it, because we all, have that, I'm going to say, type of business in our books, right? That needs and wants a different experience. It's very easy to like blanket these decisions across all clients. Like we can get caught up in that, where it's like, well, if we implement this, how's it going to impact our, $500 BOP all the way up to our, $40,000 contractor? Well, those are different and we need to look at them differently.
Yep.
And that's okay, right?
Yeah.
They probably want something differently.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage everybody to, think through or to implement some of the ways that Kylie and her team think through this, because it will help you make those decisions more effectively. And ultimately too, when it comes to technology to implement, you're going to have better, more clear decisions around what to implement. Right. So,
yeah. And also, like, just don't be scared.
yeah.
Don't be scared of it. I think that's just such a thing in our industry. Again, going back to change management, don't be scared of the technology that's there. It's here. It's not going anywhere. Like, you need to use that to your advantage. Again, like, lean into the use of GPT and machine learning and RPA. Like, lean into those things, because they're pretty efficient. They're pretty inexpensive ways to create some massive efficiencies if you use them properly. And how everybody uses those is a little different, but there's too much to gain to not embrace it. And I know there's, what I feel like I've talked to, InsurTech world loves it. We're all for it. We embrace it. We want to find out how we can implement it in like all the ways we possibly can. But when you talk to boots on the ground, they're a little scared. They're afraid that it's going to replace their jobs. They're afraid these things are going to, take over. And I would just encourage anybody from an agency standpoint to, reassure your people. And again, ask that question. Have you ever met an account manager that says they don't have enough to do?
Yeah.
Like, just
so
ask
true.
that question and help them realize, like, you're not trying to, well, I hope you're not. We definitely don't take an approach of, we want to replace people. We want to help people do their jobs to where they're not stressed out every day.
And higher value activity to our clients.
Yeah, totally. For sure.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we could keep going all day, but that was great. We always cover a lot of ground when we have you on. So we'll have to do it again. We'll just make it a series.
Yeah. Great. Not, right? Sounds awesome. Well, thanks for having me again.
Appreciate you coming on, Kylie. It's great.
Yeah, no,
great
appreciate it. Yeah. And we'll talk soon.
See you next time.